that's what the Home Grid Forum is about too, is promulgating this standard.
Yeah, so we have a thing called the ITU, and the ITU is an organization that generates recommendations about telecommunications standards. The ITU doesn't create a thing like Wi-Fi. It creates a standard that can be marketed like Wi-Fi. Home Grid Forum is a marketing organization that markets a standard called G.HN, which is really a home networking standard. And the purpose of the Home Grid Forum is to provide a level of interoperability and testing to ensure that every operator in the world has chips and devices where they all work with each other and they all work consistently. So whether it's something sold by a service provider or sold in retail, that everything is going to work seamlessly as well as a phone connection does today.
And that's for networks over a telephone network within
over
home,
three wires.
Or
power, coax, and phone.
As we agreed earlier, that I think there's pretty strong consensus of the view of this hybrid, the hybrid being a wired solution and a wireless solution. But the wired solution, again, in most cases, it will be a wire reuse one. So again, the ability to use those, and there are a couple of reasons why that's a good idea. The first reason is if you can do that, potentially you make a global market which is very big, and so you get economies of scale. But also within a given home, in a lot of cases you will only use one of those three, but there are certainly circumstances, and maybe circumstances going forward, where actually it would be a jolly good idea to segment the bandwidth and the applications between different physical media types. I mean, from some points of view, Powerline is tricky. I know Powerline is a noisy environment. In some ways not as bad as wireless, but it is a noisy environment, whereas phone line, coax are actually cleaner environments in some way. So again, the ability to actually segment your applications between physical media types, it's not going to happen overnight, but again, it's one other thing that you can do going forward.
And that's certainly a job that a reasonably clever home hub would be doing, would be choosing that video downstream is going to be here.
Again, I mean, it depends.
UGC going back upstream.
You can do that. Again, you do then get into the argument about how clever it's sensible to make this. And, again, I think certainly at the outset you would keep these things pretty simple. But, yeah, going forward, you can actually see that kind of thing. Just to come back very briefly to the management thing, I said earlier on that a lot of management was to do about content discovery, but I very much agree with the view, I can't remember if it was John or not, but certainly the ability of the end user to have some basic preferences about services, I think, is a jolly good idea. So, I actually care about that more than that. It's got to be very, very simple.
So prioritisation.
Prioritisation. Okay, so, phone calls always win, or this always win. Now, whether that's done by a direct user interface or via the service provider doesn't actually really matter, but that kind of level of service control, I think, is absolutely key. It's if you actually ask the end user, say, well, how many megabits per second do you want for that? They have no idea. They have no idea what a megabit is. So it must be a service preference type approach.
So it sparks something else of interest here. There is a group in the ITU, I think it's Standard Group 15, which is looking at the future of the internet. So a lot of these things are around
Good luck with that.
how do you actually get some of these services to the users? How do you manage them? How do you control them and make sure you're charging for them? Are being talked out in this group. Because one of the biggest problems we have today in any environment, whether it be the home network or others, is the ability to guarantee the quality of service and guarantee that the content got to where the end user was. So that's why I say in my opening statements, I think it's going to evolve the standards over time.
And that brings in issues like net neutrality and
exactly.
Who pays for this quality of carriage and quality of experience for the user, when the network provider has no control over the kind of content that's coming down.
But hopefully the results of this will allow the service provider now to have a more open discussion with the content provider, because he'll be able to guarantee some sort of flow across the network. Today it's very difficult to guarantee a service across a network on an end-to-end basis.
Yeah, there's a subtlety there in that, guarantee is a word that we sort of love and hate. Guarantees are very dangerous. But you can give a sort of statistical guarantee, or you can actually say, well, I can't actually guarantee anything because we're going to this environment where I can't have control by definition. But what I can do is I can put tools in place. So when things are going wrong, now again, I really don't want that support call, but if I do get the support call, then I want to know I can do something about it. So I think diagnostics actually is absolutely key. And no, again, there will be some kind of guarantees, but guarantees are generally very, very costly.
Another critical thing, obviously, is that the set-top box may not have the codecs support. If if you try and distribute all this video, the physical limitations of the CPU may not be able to do it. So, I mean, one of the things we're very focused on in the software aspect is the software has logic that says if that box or that TV or that device can't play it because of either codec support or the capability of the video processor or whatever, it comes up with something saying you can't do this. Simple messages saying you can't do this, not just crashing or blue screen or something. It actually says what you're trying to do in a nice, friendly way is not possible. And I think a lot of this, unfortunately, there's a whole consumer education process.
No, that's absolutely right. But I think education and learned behaviour are also very powerful things here. I mean, you can. One of the things that we've been arguing about for years is this whole business of emission control, doing this kind of thing. And it's actually a very, very difficult thing to do. But a lot of feedback, local feedback and customer education actually gets you a lot of the way there without the complexities of doing some more full-blown systems.
But it sounds like you're trying to transfer the kind of 5 nines or maybe even 4 nines expectation of my internet service over kind of 2 megabits sometimes when BT feels like it, which
is of course all the time,
to my television, where anything less than kind of 9 nines, particularly if I'm watching the apocryphal, European Cup final, is completely unacceptable.
I mean, ultimately, there has to be a commercial reality behind all this. We genuinely want to keep our customers as happy as we can, but you can't spend an infinite amount of money doing that. So I think it's a combination of diagnosis, customer education, but we want to put in the most robust network we possibly can. The ideal is if our customers never ring us up, much as we love to hear from them. We really don't want those support calls because they're very, very expensive. So you put the most robust system in you can. When it doesn't work, then you're into things like management, remote diagnosis. It's that kind of model. So even putting a figure on it, I think, is a mistake. It's basically an acceptable customer experience.
The most fantastically disruptive thing that's going on there is exactly back to your point, is there is this cloud of stuff out there. There's all this content, and if operators, walled garden effectively operators don't embrace it, they'll be left out of it. Because ultimately these televisions, whether it's the Sharp Aquos or these Toshibas or these various other Hitachi type televisions, LCDs and plasmas, they've got DLNA in it, most of them. They've got browsers in it. They've got EPGs of some sort. They're putting Wi-Fi dongles onto all these. Those can access, your Wi-Fi router quite happily. So they're going to open up all the content.
But you're going to get into an interesting challenge, because right now you take an application like Hulu, and there's a lot of discussion right now that they're going to move to paid content. And I think one of the things the service providers have learned is when you charge for something, people expect a certain level of service. And when you get it for free, you're willing to tolerate something that when it's on the big screen instead of the little screen and you're paying for it, you're going to have a much higher threshold. And in order to achieve that threshold, you're going to need a level of quality of service in the end-to-end infrastructure. And to do that costs money. And this is exactly his point.
I think we're moving to a world where we can no longer just deliver to the customer something and promise him everything. I think we're moving into a world where we've got to get to a point where we tell the customer, well, of your 100 megs of data, you have used this amount already. We can't provide that service. What would you like to shut down? And it's transparency with the customer and treating him as an adult that knows what he's looking for that I think we have to move into.
But the trouble is that's so counterintuitive to the way that the linear pay television businesses work. And the whole thing is kind of counterintuitive. I mean, they want to be gatekeepers. They see it as essential to their business model. They continue to be gatekeepers. They want things like global user interfaces for their proprietary business.
And they will.
Because they're based on quadruple play, that was the whole point, and that they can market on the fly between different services and it all has the same look and feel.
But I think the intention is honorable, which is I want it easy for the largest group of customers. It wasn't because they want absolute power and absolute control. They just want to make it easy so the phone doesn't ring.
Absolutely.
And then the cash register
does. The number one
does.
requirement is actually avoiding the support calls. Keeping the customer happy while at the same time avoiding support calls. That's where you want to be.
So if you're in a situation where you have the Wild West and anything can happen, this has a huge impact on the amount of support that has to be covered by a service provider. And finding that boundary is quite challenging.
That's the key, isn't it? I mean, where is that boundary? The consumer, the younger consumer, will always say, I want the Wild West. I want access to absolutely everything.
But they know if they go on the internet, they can be an AT&T triple play customer. They know when their television doesn't work, they call AT&T. They know when their internet doesn't work at all, they call AT&T. But when they have a problem going to YouTube, they don't call AT&T. They're cognizant of that difference.
Consumers are being educated very, very quickly. What they don't have sight to is why it's not working. And often a consumer, if he understands the reason, and it's a simple thing like taking television off the top 3 televisions that are upstairs so that you can get the real high definition picture you're looking for as a group downstairs, they'd be willing to do it. But there isn't the transparency and the level of ability for the consumer to be in control of his services.
Absolutely. Local diagnosis and local feedback. I think there's a lot of mileage in that.